The air crackled with an almost palpable tension, a hum of anticipation that vibrated through the packed auditorium. Lights, cameras, and a sea of eager faces converged on the stage, awaiting the centerpiece of this major WWE press conference. This wasn't just another announcement. This felt like a seismic shift, the kind that redefined eras. Reporters jostled for position, their cameras poised, their microphones extended like hungry tendrils. The atmosphere was a volatile cocktail of excitement and unease, a prelude to something significant, perhaps even revolutionary. Then he emerged. Malcolm Thorne, a name that had become synonymous with ruthless efficiency and unbridled arrogance in the corporate world, strode onto the stage with an almost theatrical flourish. His movements were precise, calculated, his expensive, tailor-made suit shimmering under the harsh stage lights. Thorne was a man who understood the power of an entrance, a master of commanding attention, even if that attention was often laced with disdain. His smile was less a genuine expression of joy and more a predatory baring of teeth, a signal of impending conquest. He had recently acquired a substantial stake in the WWE, enough to send tremors through the industry, and he clearly reveled in the power it afforded him. He was not a wrestling fan in the traditional sense. He was a businessman, and he saw WWE as a commodity, a balance sheet waiting to be optimized. But the stage wasn't entirely his. Standing quietly to the side, a stark contrast to Thorne's ostentatious display, was Elijah the Titan Jones. Elijah was a force of nature in the ring, a black WWE superstar whose talent was undeniable, whose athleticism was breathtaking, and whose connection with the fans was profound. He was a fan favorite, respected for his tireless work ethic and authentic persona. Yet he often found himself inexplicably overlooked for the main event spotlights, relegated to the periphery, while others with less talent, but perhaps more marketable images, soared to the top. His presence on stage alongside Thorne was curious, a visual juxtaposition of two vastly different worlds colliding. Thorne, after soaking in the applause and scattered boos that greeted him, finally seized the microphone. His voice, amplified and resonant, boomed through the hall, dripping with self-satisfaction. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, "I stand before you today, not just as an investor, but as the harbinger of a new era. The old ways are done. The stale traditions, the predictable narratives, they are relics of a bygone age. I am here to announce that I am the new owner, in all but name, and I will fix this company. I will drag WWE, kicking and screaming if I must, into the 21st century." He paused, allowing his words to hang in the air, relishing the reactions, both positive and negative. His eyes then landed on Elijah, a glint of malice entering them. It was clear Thorne had a target in mind. "And speaking of the old ways," Thorne continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "we have some talent here today. Talent that perhaps hasn't quite grasped the new direction. Take, for instance, our friend, Elijah Jones." Thorne gestured dismissively towards Elijah, as if pointing out a minor flaw in an otherwise grand design. Elijah, a fine specimen, no doubt. Strong, athletic. But is he main event material? In my new WWE, we demand more than raw athleticism. We demand star power, marketability, and frankly, Elijah, you've been given your chances. You've had your run. Perhaps it's time to recognize that some people are just supporting cast. You should be grateful for any spot you get in this new, streamlined organization. The future of WWE is about global appeal, not niche fan bases. And frankly, your appeal while passionate, is limited. A hush fell over the crowd, quickly replaced by a rising tide of indignant murmurs. Thorne had crossed a line. Elijah, despite the blatant disrespect and public humiliation, remained remarkably composed. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his eyes fixed on Thorne, but his stance remained firm, unyielding. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost a whisper, compared to Thorne's booming pronouncements, yet it carried an undeniable weight. "Mr. Thorne," Elijah began, his words resonating with a quiet dignity. "With all due respect, WWE isn't just about balance sheets and corporate jargon. It's about passion. It's about storytelling. It's about the connection between the performers and the millions of fans who tune in every week, who buy tickets, who dream of seeing their heroes in action. This company was built on the backs of its performers, on the loyalty of its fans, not just on the wallets of investors. You can buy shares, Mr. Thorne, but you can't buy the heart of this business." Thorne threw his head back and let out a loud, derisive laugh, a sound that grated on the ears. "Oh, Elijah, you are truly a relic. Heart of the business," he says. "This isn't some charity, kid. This is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. You're stuck in the past, clinging to notions of art and passion, when what we need is cold, hard business acumen. You talk about fans, I talk about demographics. You talk about performers, I talk about assets. It's clear you don't understand modern business, let alone how to run a global entertainment empire." Thorne then leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with finality, a triumphant sneer plastered across his face. "I own this place now, kid. Remember that." The crowd erupted in a cacophony of boos, a visceral rejection of Thorne's arrogance and his blatant disrespect. But Thorne merely smirked, clearly unfazed, basking in the controversy he had so expertly ignited. He believed he had delivered a knockout blow, asserted his dominance, and put Elijah firmly in his place. He had no idea just how wrong he was. Thorne's words, "I own this place now, kid. Remember that," echoed in the auditorium, a declaration of absolute power that he believed was unchallengeable. He saw Elijah as a naive performer, clinging to romantic ideals in a cutthroat business world. But what Thorne failed to grasp was the depth of Elijah's journey, the unyielding spirit forged in adversity, and the quiet determination that had brought him from the forgotten corners of Atlanta to the bright lights of the WWE. Elijah, the Titan Jones, hadn't been born into privilege or handed opportunities on a silver platter. His story began in the challenging, vibrant streets of Atlanta, Georgia, a place where dreams often clashed with harsh realities. Growing up, wrestling wasn't just entertainment. It was an escape, a vivid tapestry of heroes and villains that ignited his imagination. He'd spend hours watching grainy VHS tapes, mesmerized by the athleticism, the drama, the sheer spectacle of it all. He saw in those larger-than-life figures a path to something more, a way to transcend his circumstances. The ring became his sanctuary, a place where he could channel his boundless energy and burgeoning strength. His journey into professional wrestling was a testament to his grit. It wasn't a glamorous ascent. It began in dimly lit, sweltering gyms, training under gruff, old-school coaches who demanded perfection and offered little praise. He learned to fall, to take bumps that rattled his bones, to execute holds with precision, and to tell a story in the squared circle. From there, it was a grueling circuit of independent shows, wrestling in high school gymnasiums, community centers, and dusty fairgrounds across the country. He slept on couches, shared cramped motel rooms with other aspiring wrestlers, and often made do with instant ramen noodles for meals. The pay was meager, The recognition even less, but the dream burned bright, an unquenchable fire within him. Every match, every bump, every long drive was a step closer to his ultimate goal, the WWE. When the call finally came, it felt like a culmination of years of sacrifice. Signing with WWE was a dream realized, but it was also the beginning of a new set of challenges. He quickly learned that talent alone wasn't always enough. Despite his undeniable skill and charisma, Elijah often found himself typecast, relegated to roles that didn't fully showcase his potential. He was powerful, he was athletic, but the bigger pushes, the coveted main event slots, seemed to go to others. He watched, frustrated, as wrestlers with less in-ring ability, but perhaps a more marketable look, or a more politically connected agent, soared past him. There were moments of doubt, whispers of quitting, but the faces of the fans, the roar of the crowd, always pulled him back. He knew he had something special, something authentic that resonated beyond the corporate boardroom's understanding. And so, Elijah began to forge his own path. He connected with the fans on a deeper level, not through manufactured storylines, but through his genuine humility, his powerful and dynamic in-ring style, and his unwavering belief in the spirit of professional wrestling. He became a people's champion, even without a major title around his waist. His merchandise sold, his segments drew strong reactions, and fans began to chant his name louder and louder. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was an inspiration, a symbol of hard work and perseverance. He was the real deal, and the fans recognized it. In stark contrast to Elijah's arduous climb was Malcolm Thorne's meteoric rise in the corporate world. Thorne was a product of a different kind of jungle, the concrete canyons of Wall Street. He had cultivated a reputation as a ruthless corporate raider, a man who saw companies not as living entities, but as complex financial puzzles to be solved, stripped for parts, and reassembled for maximum profit. He specialized in hostile takeovers, identifying undervalued assets, and then systematically dismantling them to extract every last ounce of value. Empathy and sentimentality were weaknesses in his world. Efficiency and profit were the only metrics that mattered. He viewed everything, from a struggling tech startup to a global sports entertainment empire, as a commodity, a number on a spreadsheet. Thorne's initial interest in WWE wasn't born out of a love for the spectacle or a nostalgic connection to wrestling. He wasn't a fan. Instead, he saw it as a sleeping giant, a massive global brand with a passionate, built-in audience that was, in his estimation, woefully mismanaged and undervalued. He saw untapped financial potential, a sprawling enterprise ripe for his brand of optimization. He began buying shares quietly, strategically accumulating a significant stake without drawing too much attention. He moved with the precision of a predator, observing, calculating, and waiting for the opportune moment to strike. He envisioned a WWE transformed by his corporate genius, a leaner, more profitable machine, devoid of what he considered to be the unnecessary artistic elements and emotional attachments that, in his view, simply got in the way of the bottom line. He saw the fans as consumers, the wrestlers as interchangeable assets, and the rich history of the company as mere background noise to his grand financial symphony. To Thorne, Elijah Jones was just another cog in a very large machine, a cog that, if it didn't fit his new specifications, could easily be replaced. He had no idea that this particular cog had a mind, a heart, and a plan of its own. Elijah's quiet resolve, born from years of navigating the complex currents of the WWE, hardened with Thorne's arrogant pronouncements. He knew that true change rarely came from the top down without a fight, and he was ready for it. The seeds of his defiance had been sown long before Thorne's public mockery, cultivated in the crucible of his own struggles within the company. His moment to truly shine, to prove his undeniable worth, arrived not on a grand stage designed for him, but through sheer force of will, in a match that was supposed to be just another night. It was a seemingly ordinary pay-per-view, a mid-card bout against a respected but not top-tier opponent. The creative team, under the lingering influence of older, more traditional figures, hadn't given Elijah much to work with, a familiar story. But Elijah, fueled by the frustration of being consistently overlooked and the unwavering support of his growing fan base, decided this was his night. From the opening bell, he wrestled with a ferocity and passion that captivated every single person in the arena and watching at home. He innovated, he pushed boundaries, executing high-flying maneuvers with seamless grace and delivering powerful, impactful strikes that resonated through the building. He told a story of struggle and triumph, with every move, every expression. The crowd, initially subdued, slowly rose to its feet, their cheers building into a deafening roar. By the time Elijah hit his finishing move, securing a clean, decisive victory, the arena was in an absolute frenzy. The commentators, usually reserved, were screaming in excitement, acknowledging the undeniable star power that had just been unleashed. This wasn't just a win, it was a statement. Elijah had delivered an unforgettable performance, a masterclass in professional wrestling that transcended the booking, the politics, and the preconceived notions. That night, Elijah the Titan Jones became undeniable. His name trended globally, clips of his match went viral, and the conversation shifted from "Who is Elijah Jones?" to "When will Elijah Jones get his championship?" The impact was immediate and profound. Elijah's merchandise sales, already respectable, skyrocketed, outselling even some of the established main eventers. His segments on weekly television shows consistently garnered higher ratings, proving his drawing power. Fans, energized by his raw talent and authenticity, began to chant his name louder, demanding more of him, more opportunities, more spotlight. He was no longer just a fan favorite. He was a phenomenon, an organic grassroots movement. The pressure on WWE management to elevate him became immense, a tidal wave of public opinion that was increasingly difficult to ignore. Yet, despite this undeniable groundswell of support, there remained an internal resistance within some factions of WWE management. These were often older, more traditional figures, entrenched in their ways, who clung to outdated metrics and perceived market demographics. They'd cite unproven main event appeal, or whisper about not fitting the mold, thinly veiled excuses that often masked deeper, unspoken biases. They were hesitant to disrupt the established order, fearing that pushing Elijah to the very top might alienate certain segments of their audience, or simply because it wasn't how things were done. Elijah felt the subtle pushback, the quiet attempts to temper his rise, but he also felt the growing strength of his supporters. Meanwhile, Malcolm Thorne, a man who saw every ripple in the market as an opportunity, was steadily increasing his influence. He continued to acquire more shares, his financial stake growing to an intimidating level. He began to use his significant shareholding as leverage, pushing for radical changes within the company. His mantra was streamlining and maximizing profits, terms that often translated into cutting costs, regardless of the impact on the product or the talent. He saw the burgeoning popularity of Elijah not as an asset to be cultivated, but as an uncontrollable variable, an inconvenient disruption to his carefully planned corporate takeover. Thorne's voice in board meetings grew louder, more insistent, his presence more domineering. He wasn't just an investor anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with, shaping the discourse and dictating the direction of the company. Thorne's influence inevitably led to clashes with the WWE creative team, the very heart and soul of the company's storytelling. He dismissed their carefully crafted narratives, their character arcs, and their understanding of the wrestling audience as too emotional or not commercial enough. He ridiculed their passion, their dedication to the art form, seeing it as a weakness. He wanted more corporate synergy, more cross-promotional opportunities, and less of what he disdainfully called wrestling tradition. He pushed for storylines that prioritized quick, superficial gains over long-term character development, for talent that looked good on a spreadsheet rather than in the ring. The creative team found themselves increasingly stifled, their artistic vision clashing with Thorne's cold, calculating business logic. Elijah, with his finger on the pulse of the locker room and the fans, keenly felt this corporate shift. He saw the creative team's frustration, the growing unease among his fellow performers, and the subtle but significant changes in the company's direction. He felt the increasing pressure to conform, to dilute his authentic persona, to fit Thorne's new commercial vision. But Elijah, true to his roots and his unwavering commitment to his fans, refused to bend. He began to speak out, subtly at first, in closed-door meetings, advocating for the wrestlers, for the integrity of the product, and for the art of professional wrestling itself. He became a quiet but persistent voice of dissent, a beacon of resistance against Thorne's corporate takeover. This principled stand, this refusal to be just another compliant asset, put him squarely on Thorne's radar. To Malcolm Thorne, Elijah Jones was no longer just a talented wrestler. He was a problem, a symbol of the old ways that needed to be eradicated in his new, ruthlessly efficient WWE. Thorne, in his arrogance, saw Elijah's passion as a vulnerability, not realizing it was his greatest strength and the very foundation of his impending downfall. Thorne's disdain for Elijah, initially dismissive, now curdled into active animosity. He saw Elijah's growing influence and quiet defiance as a direct challenge to his authority, a pebble in the well-oiled machine he was meticulously constructing. Having strategically acquired enough shares and meticulously garnered sufficient board votes, Thorne had, by all practical measures, become the dominant force within the WWE. While not yet the sole official owner, he wielded power commensurate with one, making unilateral decisions that reverberated throughout the company. He reveled in this newfound de facto ownership, convinced that his business acumen would swiftly reshape WWE into a global behemoth of unparalleled profitability. His first major moves were a series of new corporate directives, presented as innovative efficiencies but quickly recognized by the talent and staff as thinly veiled cost-cutting measures. Production budgets were slashed, leading to noticeable drops in the quality of sets, lighting, and even costume design. Wrestler pay for certain roles, particularly for those not deemed main event material, by Thorne's subjective and financially driven standards, was significantly reduced, fostering widespread resentment and anxiety within the locker room. Perhaps most galling to the passionate wrestling community, Thorne began openly pushing for more marketable but undeniably less talented stars. Individuals chosen for their social media presence or perceived commercial appeal, rather than their in-ring skill or connection with the audience. Creative integrity was sacrificed at the altar of raw, immediate profit projections. Elijah, witnessing these changes unfold, could not remain silent. The subtle advocacy he had engaged in now escalated. He became a vocal critic, albeit still behind the scenes, speaking up forcefully in talent meetings, questioning Thorne's decisions with a calm logic that infuriated the promoter. Elijah articulated the growing concerns of the locker room, highlighting how these directives would not only diminish the quality of the product, but also erode the very foundation of trust and loyalty that bound the performers to the company, and crucially, to the fans. He became the unofficial spokesperson for the disgruntled talent, a respected and articulate voice for those who felt powerless against Thorne's corporate juggernaut. Thorne, ever the manipulator, recognized the threat Elijah posed to his carefully constructed image of absolute control. He couldn't simply fire Elijah without causing a massive fan backlash, given his immense popularity. Instead, Thorne resorted to public humiliation attempts, a calculated strategy to undermine Elijah's credibility and break his spirit. He began to deliberately book Elijah in less favorable matches, often against opponents who were clearly beneath his skill level, or in segments designed to make him look foolish. He approved demeaning storylines that went against Elijah's established honorable character, attempting to portray him as a petulant rebel or a disloyal employee who couldn't adapt to the new vision. Thorne used his considerable influence to plant stories in wrestling media, painting Elijah as difficult, uncooperative, and out of touch. The goal was clear: isolate Elijah, diminish his standing, and make an example of him for anyone else daring to question Thorne's authority. This escalating tension culminated in the very incident that had started everything: the press conference. Thorne, blinded by his own hubris and convinced of his unassailable position, saw Elijah as the ultimate symbol of resistance, the embodiment of the old WWE that he was determined to dismantle. He decided that this public forum was the perfect stage to make an example of Elijah, to assert his ownership in the most unambiguous and demeaning way possible. He wanted to crush Elijah's spirit in front of the world, to demonstrate once and for all who was truly in charge. His condescending remarks about Elijah's potential, his dismissive tone, and the sneering implication that Elijah wasn't main event material were all carefully orchestrated jabs. And then came the final venomous declaration: "I own this place now, kid. Remember that." It wasn't just a statement. It was a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge issued with the full weight of Thorne's perceived power behind it. The crowd's boos, a symphony of disapproval, washed over Thorne, but he merely smirked, confident in his victory. He believed he had delivered a knockout blow, publicly shaming Elijah and cementing his own dominance. But Thorne, in his profound arrogance, had utterly misjudged his opponent. He saw a wrestler. Elijah saw a battleground. Despite the stinging public humiliation, despite the cameras flashing and the microphones thrust forward, Elijah didn't break. His composure remained intact, a testament to years of facing adversity and tempering his emotions. He looked Thorne directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering, betraying no fear, no anger, only a quiet, steely resolve. In that silent exchange, a promise was made, though Thorne was too self-absorbed to perceive it. Elijah knew something Thorne didn't, a secret that had been meticulously guarded, a plan that had been unfolding in the shadows. Far from the glare of the public eye and Thorne's arrogant pronouncements, the promoter saw a defeated man. Elijah saw a turning point. The game, as far as Elijah was concerned, had just begun. The reverberations of Thorne's arrogant declaration, "I own this place now, kid. Remember that," echoed far beyond the press conference hall, reaching the hallowed, often hushed corridors of the WWE corporate headquarters. The public spectacle, coupled with the ever-present undercurrent of discontent stirred by Thorne's aggressive tactics and the steadily declining morale within the company, finally forced the hand of the established leadership. A special board meeting was swiftly called, ostensibly to address the future direction of WWE. For Malcolm Thorne, this was merely a formality, a ceremonial gathering of old guard figures who would, he presumed, rubber stamp his next audacious moves. He saw it as another opportunity to showcase his undisputed authority and vision. Thorne strode into the opulent boardroom, a space usually reserved for hushed negotiations and strategic deliberations, with an air of supreme confidence. His tailored suit, always impeccable, seemed to gleam with self-satisfaction. He carried a sleek, leather-bound portfolio, brimming with meticulously prepared charts, graphs, and bullet points detailing his vision for a new, profitable WWE. He greeted the few board members already present with a curt nod, his eyes scanning the room, already mentally preparing his grand performance. He took his customary seat at the head of the long mahogany table, a position he had increasingly come to occupy, symbolizing his perceived dominance. But as he settled in, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. Tucked away in a chair at the far end of the room, almost obscured by a potted plant, sat Elijah Jones. He was dressed, not in his wrestling gear, but in a simple, well-fitting suit, observing the room with a quiet intensity. Thorne's lip curled almost imperceptibly. He dismissed Elijah's presence as an insignificant detail, perhaps a token gesture for public relations, or a desperate attempt by the old guard to show they still cared about the talent. Just a performer, Thorne mused inwardly, confident that Elijah was merely there as a silent observer, completely irrelevant to the high-stakes corporate maneuvering about to unfold. He barely acknowledged Elijah with a dismissive glance, his mind already racing ahead to his presentation. The meeting commenced with the arrival of the long-standing chairman of the board, a figure of quiet authority and immense respect within the company, whose tenure predated Thorne's involvement by decades. He was a man known for his measured words and strategic foresight. He began with a somber tone, acknowledging the recent turbulence that had gripped the company and the undeniable need for stability and a clear path forward. His voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension in the room, setting a serious tone that Thorne, in his eagerness, almost overlooked. Thorne, eager to seize the stage, launched into his aggressive pitch. He spoke with a practiced cadence, his voice resonating with an almost evangelical fervor, as he outlined his plans to restructure and optimize every facet of the WWE. He peppered his speech with corporate jargon. Synergistic efficiencies, market capitalization, asset divestiture, shareholder value, all designed to impress and overwhelm. He painted a picture of a leaner, more profitable company, stripped of what he deemed unnecessary sentimentality and outdated traditions. He spoke as if he were already in complete, unquestionable control, his words dripping with the certainty of a man who believed he held all the cards. He detailed how he would cut budgets further, streamline talent acquisition, and introduce new revenue streams that he claimed would revolutionize the wrestling industry. His presentation was a relentless barrage of financial projections and bold, almost dictatorial pronouncements. He was deep into his impassioned monologue, detailing a particularly aggressive cost-cutting measure, when the chairman, with a subtle but firm gesture, raised a hand. Thorne, momentarily flustered by the unexpected interruption, paused mid-sentence. The chairman's gaze was direct, unwavering. "Mr. Thorne," he interjected politely, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "Have you finished making your case for control?" Thorne, momentarily thrown off balance, stammered a little. "Yes, Chairman. My vision is clear. My plans are comprehensive. I believe I have outlined precisely how we will move forward and secure the profitability of this enterprise under my..." Guidance. He tried to regain his composure, a hint of annoyance flickering in his eyes at the interruption. The chairman nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He then cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the board members, lingering for a moment on Thorne, and then, surprisingly, on Elijah. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne, for your comprehensive presentation," the chairman began, his tone now shifting, becoming more deliberate, more significant. "However, before we proceed with any further discussion or decisions regarding the future direction of World Wrestling Entertainment, there is a crucial development that the board needs to be made aware of. It concerns a recent, highly significant acquisition of shares, one that has, as of this morning, irrevocably shifted the balance of power within our company." Thorne's confident smirk began to waver. A cold dread, a feeling he rarely experienced, started to curdle in his stomach. He looked around the room, confused, his eyes darting from one board member to another, searching for a familiar face, a sign of who this new player might be. He expected another corporate shark, perhaps a rival conglomerate, someone he could outmaneuver, someone he could buy out or strong-arm. His face, usually a mask of smug assurance, began to show a hint of genuine worry, a crack in his carefully constructed facade of invincibility. He tried to speak, but no words came out. The chairman continued, his voice gaining a quiet authority that commanded absolute attention. "Therefore, it is with great pleasure, and with the full backing of this board, that I introduce the new majority shareholder, and indeed, the new acting chairman of the Board of World Wrestling Entertainment." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing their full weight to settle upon the stunned silence of the room. Thorne's breath hitched in his throat, his eyes wide with a dawning, unwelcome realization. The chairman's gaze, filled with an almost mischievous glint, shifted from the wide-eyed Thorne to the quiet figure at the end of the table. With a slow, deliberate movement, he extended his hand, gesturing towards Elijah Jones. "Mr. Jones," the chairman announced, his voice resonating with an unexpected note of triumph. Elijah, who had been sitting patiently, almost invisibly, slowly rose to his feet. His movements were calm, deliberate, utterly composed. He met Thorne's stunned, disbelieving stare with an unreadable expression. Thorne, however, could not contain his shock. A loud, derisive scoff escaped his lips, quickly followed by a short, sharp laugh that bordered on hysteria. "Him?" Thorne spluttered, pointing an accusatory, trembling finger at Elijah. "A wrestler? What's he doing here? Collecting autographs? Did he buy a few shares? Did he? Cute. Very cute. Is this some kind of joke, Chairman? A publicity stunt?" He looked around the room, trying to rally support, to find someone who would share in his incredulity. But the board members remained impassive, their faces revealing nothing. The chairman, allowing Thorne's outburst to subside, maintained his calm demeanor. A slight, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips as he clarified, his voice cutting through the lingering tension in the room. "Mr. Jones didn't merely buy a few shares, Mr. Thorne. Nor is this a joke. Mr. Jones, through a carefully orchestrated consortium of investors he strategically assembled and personally led, has acquired a controlling interest in World Wrestling Entertainment. As of this morning, Mr. Jones is the largest single shareholder and, by unanimous board decision, the new acting chairman of the board." The words hit Thorne like a physical blow. The color drained from his face with startling speed, leaving his skin a ghastly, ashen white. His jaw, which had been hanging open in a mixture of disbelief and scorn, now dropped further, unhinged. The smug, self-satisfied smile that had been his constant companion for months vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. His eyes, wide and unfocused, darted between the chairman and Elijah, as if seeking confirmation that this was a cruel, elaborate prank. But the unwavering seriousness in the chairman's eyes and the quiet, unwavering confidence in Elijah's stance confirmed the impossible. The realization struck him with the force of a freight train. He had been utterly, completely outmaneuvered. The man he had publicly humiliated, the talent he had dismissed as a mere commodity, was now his boss. Fear, cold and visceral, began to creep into his chest. Replacing his previous arrogance, he looked utterly, irrevocably defeated. Elijah, now standing at the head of the table, moved with an almost regal grace. He didn't gloat, didn't offer a triumphant smirk. Instead, he maintained a calm, collected demeanor, his voice steady and clear as he began to explain his long-term plan. "Mr. Thorne," Elijah began, his voice devoid of any personal animosity, but firm with newfound authority, "you assumed my presence here was one of a simple employee. You assumed my interest in this company was purely as a performer. You were mistaken." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "I didn't just buy shares on a whim. For months I have been quietly working, reaching out to individuals who share a deep, abiding passion for professional wrestling. Not just for its financial prospects, but for its integrity, its history, its heart." He looked around the room, making eye contact with every board member, and then back to Thorne, whose face was now a mask of horror. "I rallied other long-term passionate investors. This consortium includes former wrestlers who have dedicated their lives to this sport, old-school promoters who understand the artistry of it, and even some wealthy fans who, like me, were deeply concerned about the direction this company was taking under your leadership. They believed, as I did, that the soul of WWE was being eroded, that the focus had shifted entirely from entertaining our audience and supporting our talent to simply extracting maximum profit at any cost." Elijah continued, his voice gaining a quiet power. "We watched your hostile takeover attempts, your streamlining, your budget cuts, and your disregard for both the performers and the fans. We saw how morale plummeted, how creative freedom was stifled, and how the very essence of what makes WWE great was being systematically dismantled. While you were making public pronouncements and attempting to humiliate those who questioned you, we were building a coalition. We were strategically acquiring shares, quietly, meticulously, ensuring that when the time was right, we would have the numbers, the influence, to reclaim what was being lost." He then articulated the why behind his audacious move, directing his gaze squarely at Thorne. "I didn't do this for personal power, Mr. Thorne. I did it for the fans who dedicate their loyalty every week. I did it for the men and women in the locker room who pour their hearts and souls into their craft, only to be undervalued and disrespected. I did it for the legacy of professional wrestling itself, a legacy built on passion, storytelling, and athletic prowess, not just on quarterly earnings reports. You saw a balance sheet, Mr. Thorne. You saw only numbers and potential commodities. I, on the other hand, saw a family. I saw a community. I saw something worth fighting for, something worth saving from those who would strip it bare for profit." Thorne, his face a mottled mix of white and crimson, finally managed to sputter out a few words. This is irregular, unprecedented. There must be some loophole, some clause you've overlooked. My contracts, my agreements, they are ironclad." He tried to stand, but his legs felt like jelly, His hands trembling violently, he desperately searched for an argument, a legal technicality, anything that could undo this catastrophic turn of events. He looked at the chairman, then at the other board members, a desperate plea in his eyes, but found no sympathy. He realized, with a sickening lurch, that his own monumental arrogance had led him to underestimate Elijah Jones completely, to misjudge the quiet strength and strategic brilliance hidden beneath the superstar's calm exterior. He had been so consumed by his own perceived power, so certain of his invincibility, that he had failed to see the quiet storm brewing right under his nose. The game was indeed over, and Thorne, the self-proclaimed owner, had lost everything. The board, now unequivocally under Elijah's leadership, and profoundly influenced by the undeniable shift in power, acted swiftly and decisively. With Elijah presiding, a unanimous vote was cast to immediately remove Malcolm Thorne from any and all positions of influence within World Wrestling Entertainment. Furthermore, a comprehensive review of all his recent corporate directives, policy changes, and financial decisions was ordered, with the explicit aim of reversing any actions deemed detrimental to the company's long-term health, its talent, or its fan base. Thorne, still reeling from the shock, sat slumped in his chair, a defeated figure, his once impeccable suit now seeming to hang loosely on his suddenly diminished frame. He attempted no further protests, his bluster having evaporated completely in the face of such absolute, undeniable defeat. With Thorne's immediate threat neutralized, Elijah wasted no time in outlining his vision for the reinvigorated WWE. His presentation was a stark contrast to Thorne's jargon-filled, profit-driven monologue. Elijah spoke passionately about a renewed focus on athlete welfare, promising better health care, improved travel conditions, and comprehensive mental health support for all performers. He emphasized creative freedom, pledging to empower the writing teams and performers to develop compelling storylines that resonated with the audience, rather than being dictated by cold corporate metrics. Fan engagement, he declared, would once again be paramount, with initiatives to bring the WWE closer to its global fan base through interactive experiences and accessible content. Crucially, he stressed the importance of investing back into the product itself, from state-of-the-art production values to nurturing new talent in developmental territories. He spoke with conviction about fostering diversity and ensuring equal opportunity for all talent, regardless of background, promising a more inclusive and representative future for the company. His words resonated deeply with the remaining board members, who had grown weary of Thorne's ruthless, profit-at-all-costs approach. As news of the Boardroom coup inevitably leaked, the public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Malcolm Thorne, who had so vocally proclaimed his ownership and his intention to reshape WWE in his own image, quickly became the subject of widespread ridicule across traditional media and, more ferociously, on social media platforms. His past boasts, his condescending remarks, and his dismissive attitude towards the talent and the fans were replayed and retweeted thousands of times, now accompanied by mocking captions and triumphant memes. The very fans he had so casually dismissed celebrated his downfall with an almost visceral joy. Hashtags like #Dwas Thorne Down and @Titan Takes Over trended globally, a testament to Elijah's immense popularity and the collective frustration Thorne had engendered. His carefully crafted image as an infallible corporate genius crumbled overnight, replaced by that of an arrogant, outmaneuvered fool. Elijah, now the undisputed leader, wasted no time in addressing the public. He held another press conference, but this one was vastly different from the one where Thorne had attempted to humiliate him. This time, Elijah stood at the podium, not as a defiant superstar, but as the chairman of the board, exuding a quiet confidence and genuine humility. He spoke directly to the fans, his voice clear and earnest, promising a return to the core values that had made WWE a global phenomenon. He thanked them for their unwavering support, for their passion, and for their trust, acknowledging that their voices had been heard. He vowed to steer the company back towards its roots, celebrating the athleticism, the drama, and the unique connection between performers and audience that defined professional wrestling. Without explicitly naming Thorne, Elijah delivered a subtle, yet undeniably potent jab that resonated deeply with everyone who had followed the saga. "This company," he stated, his gaze sweeping across the assembled journalists and cameras, "belongs to the people who love it, not just the people who want to profit from it." The message was clear, a direct repudiation of Thorne's corporate philosophy and a reaffirmation of WWE's foundational principles. It was a statement that perfectly encapsulated the sentiment of the fans and the locker room alike, drawing widespread applause from those present and a torrent of positive reactions online. Later that day, a scene unfolded that perfectly symbolized the dramatic shift in power. Malcolm Thorne was observed exiting the WWE headquarters. There was no flashy limousine waiting for him, no entourage, no triumphant swagger. Instead, he hailed a regular taxi from the curb, his shoulders slumped, his face pale and etched with defeat. He carried only a small briefcase, a stark contrast to the thick, leather-bound portfolio he had brought in that morning, brimming with his now irrelevant plans. The confident, arrogant promoter who had strutted into the building just hours earlier, proclaiming himself the new owner, was now a broken man, leaving in quiet disgrace. He was no longer the owner. He was merely a footnote in a story he had so arrogantly tried to control. Back inside the headquarters, a palpable sense of relief and renewed hope swept through the locker room. News of Elijah's takeover spread like wildfire, igniting celebrations among the wrestlers and staff. They gathered in small groups, sharing stories, high fives, and even a few tears of joy. Elijah Jones, their colleague, their friend, the man who had always stood up for them, had not only saved their company, but had also restored their faith in its future. They saw him not just as a champion in the ring, but as a true champion for their cause, someone who understood their struggles and genuinely cared about their well-being. A sense of camaraderie and shared purpose, long suppressed under Thorne's reign, began to blossom anew. They knew that with Elijah at the helm, their voices would be heard, their artistry respected, and their passion for professional wrestling would once again be at the heart of everything WWE did. The future, for the first time in a long time, looked bright. 6 months later, the transformation within World Wrestling Entertainment, under Elijah Jones's leadership, was nothing short of remarkable. The air around the company, once thick with corporate tension and a palpable sense of unease, had been replaced by an invigorating atmosphere of creative freedom and renewed purpose. The programming itself reflected this profound shift. Storylines, once criticized for being predictable or overly corporate, now crackled with originality and emotional depth. Wrestlers were given more autonomy to develop their characters, leading to more authentic and compelling performances. Fan engagement soared, not just in viewership figures, but in the palpable excitement and connection felt by the global audience. Social media was abuzz with positive conversations, and live event attendance saw a significant uptick as fans flocked to witness the revitalized product. Athlete welfare, a cornerstone of Elijah's initial promises, had seen substantial improvements. Comprehensive health insurance plans were now standard, extending beyond immediate in-ring injuries to include long-term care and rehabilitation. A robust mental health support program had been implemented, offering counseling and resources to performers navigating the unique pressures of their demanding careers. Travel arrangements were streamlined, ensuring less grueling schedules and more comfortable accommodations. The locker room, once a hotbed of quiet resentment, now buzzed with camaraderie and a shared sense of ownership. Talent, both veteran and rookie, spoke openly about feeling valued, respected, and genuinely cared for by the company. This newfound morale translated directly into their performances, injecting an undeniable passion into every match and promo. Elijah, against all odds, managed to balance his demanding executive duties as chairman of the board with his active wrestling career. He was still the Titan in the ring, his powerful physique and electrifying presence continuing to captivate audiences. But now he was also the visionary behind the scenes, deftly navigating board meetings, strategic planning sessions, and media engagements. He proved that true leadership didn't require him to abandon his roots. Instead, his first-hand experience as a performer informed his decisions, making him an incredibly effective and empathetic leader. His ability to seamlessly transition between the boardroom and the squared circle only amplified his legend, cementing his status as a truly unique figure in the history of professional wrestling. He was a champion of the people, both on and off screen, embodying the spirit of resilience and smart strategy that had brought about this monumental change. Malcolm Thorne, the arrogant promoter whose grand pronouncements had once filled press conferences, had faded into relative obscurity. His business reputation had taken a significant and irreparable hit. The story of his public humiliation and subsequent ousting from WWE spread like wildfire through the corporate world. He was no longer seen as the infallible corporate genius, the Midas-touched investor who could turn anything into gold. Instead, he became a cautionary tale, an example of how unchecked arrogance and a singular focus on profit could lead to catastrophic failure. His attempts to launch new ventures or acquire other companies were met with skepticism, his past actions at WWE casting a long, dark shadow over his credibility. The financial community, once eager to back his audacious plays, now viewed him with extreme caution, wary of his tendency to alienate key stakeholders and underestimate his opponents. His arrogance, the very trait he had worn as a badge of honor, had ultimately cost him dearly, stripping him not only of his position, but of his professional standing. He was a pariah, a ghost of his former self, a stark reminder that true power stemmed not from wealth alone, but from respect, integrity, and a genuine understanding of the human element. The lasting message of Elijah Jones's incredible journey resonated deeply within the wrestling world and beyond. True ownership isn't merely about money or controlling assets. It's about passion, respect, and a profound understanding of the soul of what you're leading. It's about recognizing the value of every individual, from the lowest paid crew member to the highest profile superstar, and fostering an environment where creativity and genuine connection can flourish. Elijah had not just bought a company. He had reclaimed its spirit, demonstrating that leadership, driven by empathy and a deep-seated love for the craft, could achieve far more than any cold, calculated corporate strategy. He proved that the heart of an enterprise, especially one built on entertainment and human connection, was its most valuable asset. One evening, months after the dramatic Boardroom showdown, Elijah Jones stood in the center of a roaring arena. The main event had just concluded, and he had successfully defended his championship title in a grueling, spectacular match that had the crowd on its feet. Sweat glistened on his powerful frame, his chest heaving with exertion. but a look of profound satisfaction graced his face. He held the championship belt high above his head, the gold gleaming under the spotlights, a tangible symbol of his hard-won victories, both inside and outside the ring. The deafening cheers of the crowd, a symphony of adoration and respect, washed over him. He took a moment, soaking in the energy, the love, the collective joy of thousands of fans. Then he lowered the belt slightly, his eyes finding a camera lens amidst the sea of lights. A quiet, confident smile spread across his face, a smile that spoke volumes. It wasn't a smirk of arrogance, but one of deep contentment and purpose. He had fought for this, not just for the title around his waist, but for the future of the company he loved, the sport he cherished, and the people who dedicated their lives to it. He had faced down corporate greed, challenged assumptions, and, through sheer will and brilliant strategy, emerged victorious. He had proven that a true Titan could indeed conquer all, not just with brute force, but with intelligence, integrity, and an unshakable belief in what was right. Elijah Jones, the Titan, now also the Visionary, stood as a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope, and the unwavering embodiment of the spirit of professional wrestling. The company was in good hands, and the future had never looked brighter.